Let's go ahead and get started here. First one I pulled up on here is, who are the four horsemen, and how does your view differ from Bonson's view that one of them is Christ?
Well, it does differ in that regard. Dr. Bonson, I'll tell you something about it. He's my good friend and my professor, my mentor. And we were at a Bible conference once. He was from Los Angeles, and I was from, where was I? From Greenville, South Carolina at the time.
Dr. Jim,
Yeah. Not on?
you know,
They don't need to hear it. They didn't get it? There you go. So Dr. Bonson and I were good friends, and we were speaking at a conference on eschatology once. And they had a Q&A session, and somewhere along the way, I said, I only disagree with Dr. Bonson on two eschatological issues. Now, he was from Los Angeles, and I was from the Deep South. I said, the one theological issue is the identity of the harlot in the book of Revelation. Not this topic, but it's related. And the other is the identity of the National League West Division champion of the Major League Baseball. He thinks it's going to be LA Dodgers. I think it's going to be Braves. And I was right. But yes, I do differ with him and others on that issue of the white horse. I believe it represents Vespasian, the Roman general who was sent to destroy the temple in about the year 67. And some say that Dr. Bonson among them say that the white horse represents Christ, Revelation 19, coming in victory. But I think if we look at the four horsemen, we'll see they're parallel there in certain respects that won't allow that, and that there's a difference between the horsemen in Revelation 19 and the one that is there in Revelation 6. But details are in the commentary back there. But yeah, we disagreed on that.
Sounds good. Okay. As partial preterists, we believe that much of Revelation was prophecy concerning the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. What parts of John's revelation are still in our future, and how do we avoid full preterism?
Well, full preterism says that all prophetic events and all the Bible have been fulfilled by the year 70. Jesus' second coming, the resurrection of the dead, the final judgment, all that occurred in AD 70. So it's a false view, it's a Gnostic view, and it's contrary to evangelical orthodoxy. But Revelation opens with the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave to his servants to show them the things which must shortly take place. And then in verse 3 he says, blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of the prophecy of this book, for the time is near. Then he says the exact same thing in Revelation 22, verses 6 and 10. So the bookends of the book of Revelation had to do with the nearness of events. However, there is one place in Revelation, beginning with 1,000 years, you can't compact 1,000 years into a short time frame, or else you destroyed preterism. If 1,000 years could be a near time frame, then preterism not very helpful, is it? But so I believe in Revelation 20, where the 1,000 years begins, and it goes up to Revelation 20, verse 11, where the resurrection occurs and the great judgment occurs. That section, by the very nature of the case, speaking of 1,000 years rather than a near term, that is the part that extends into the future. And the rest of the book of Revelation is controlled by the near-term indicators. Now, for the new heavens and new earth, you've got to recognize the now but not yet principle. There are some things that are occurring now that anticipate something that is not yet. And so the new creation, we are new creations in Christ. We anticipate the new creation at the end of history. So that's the way we understand the Revelation 21 and 22 about the new creation. There is a new creation coming that's ultimate and glorious and earthly, but there's also the new creation that is here in principle as we are new creations in Christ, and beginning the process of the ultimate new creation.
Okay. Mr. Gentry, your eschatology has the momentum of a runaway freight train. Why are you so popular? Seriously, though, some post-mill writers understand last days and end of the age to speak toward AD 70, the last days of the Old Covenant. What are your thoughts on that interpretation?
The only place we find the end of the age mentioned in the gospel record is in Matthew's gospel. It's mentioned 4 times. And the first, well, it's in 4 sections, not necessarily just 4 phrases, but 4 sections. And when we look at the first occurrence of the end of the age in Matthew 13, we find that the resurrection occurs at the end of the age. So the end of the age is not talking about the end of the old covenant in the year 70. It's talking about the end of the age that we're in now until the end of history, because the resurrection occurs at the end of history. And I'm writing a book, as a matter of fact, on the, it's called, what is the book called? You're not supposed to get a title to a book before you wrote it, but I've got a working title. I'm writing a book now called The 2 Ages of Redemptive History. You've got this age, which is the age under Adam, and the age to come, which is the age under the second Adam, Jesus Christ. And so the controlling principles in the ages are either Adam and his fall or Christ and his resurrection. Well, Christ's the coming age actually comes at the second coming of Christ and the establishment of new heavens and new earth. However, we're already anticipating that, and we have a now but not yet overlap of the 2 ages. This age, which is the fallen age of satanic dominion, will continue until the end of the world, but the new age of eternity has already started to overlap, and we're already beginning to taste the powers of the age to come, Hebrews 6:5. And so that things that we're doing now anticipate what ultimately will be done. We are new creation, but there will ultimately be a formal, actual, universal new creation. But we anticipate that now. So the end of the age there is not confined to the end of the Old Covenant era. It deals with the end of history, end of the fallen age. Well, there's so many little components that I can't get into it. It'll get kind of confusing. But if you look at the way Jesus deals with the Sadducees, and Jesus says at the end of the age, they'd be like the angels of heaven, neither marrying nor giving in marriage. If that's the end of the age of the Old Covenant, then we should not be getting married today. So that system has a problem built into it. So the end of the age is a special phrase that deals with the end of history. This age started with Adam, and it'll end with the second coming of Christ. But the age to come is ultimately begins with the coming of Christ, second coming of Christ, and goes out into eternity. But it's so powerful, it's already splashing over into this age, as it were, because the impact of it is so enormous at the end that we're experiencing and enjoying it now.
This is pretty much the same question about the end of the age.
I already handled that one then.
End of the age.
That's why I'm writing a book.
You want to go through this faster, possibly?
Yeah.
If you were living close to Christ's return in the future, what would that world look like?
Well, it would be certainly different from what we experience now. It would involve Christian principles applying across the spectrum in politics and law and research, every area of life. And we would see, instead of hiding Christian faith like movie stars, if they're conservatives, got to hide their conservatism in Hollywood or they'd be fired. Instead of that kind of situation, we'll have the good guys dominating, and instead of having to retreat into the background. And so it'll be a world of peace and of prosperity. Where there's peace, there's the prospect of prosperity, because the means of production are easily pursued without worrying about somebody bombing you or whatever. And so it will be a world such as you would dream of.
Right. Who were some early church fathers who were post-mill?
Well, to ask that question, you have to be careful not to assume that the full-scale system was inherent in these early church fathers. Postmillennialism grew as a system, even as premillennialism grew, and more is added to it as Christians began developing connections between various scriptures. So early church fathers that were sympathetic to the postmillennial view would be Eusebius, and he wrote Ecclesiastical History, which is a very famous book, and Athanasius, and he's called by some postmillennialists the patron saint of postmillennialism because he had more of the structure of postmillennialism in his system than most people at the time. Augustine had sympathies with the postmillennial outlook. In his The City of God, we can see some evidence of that. But they weren't full-blown postmillennialists. This is a system that's developed over time. The seeds are there. The basic idea of postmillennialism is that Christianity will advance in the world and come to a place of majority influence. And you got all the little details. Well, what do we do with the Revelation? What do we do with this, that, and the other? So there'll be postmillennials debate among themselves. Calvinists debate among themselves. Baptists don't do that. But as Presbyterians, we do that. And so we don't expect the whole system to be found in the early church fathers. But if we find the principle that the hope is for the gospel of Christ to overwhelm the world, that's the postmillennial hope, no matter what some of the little details of how they get there are.
Right. Okay. When does Christ's kingdom begin? Birth, start of his ministry, cross, resurrection, or ascension?
Well, it's in the complex of events associated with his death, burial, and resurrection. But again, it's like the now but not yet principle, that they have elements of it beginning to show up earlier in anticipating what is to come. Formally, when he says, the several times I read in the Great Commission where he says the now time and all that, we see that already happening just before he goes to the cross. But he says, now I'm going to cast out the evil one, and I will draw them into myself. So we see it in principle arising during the context of his redemptive work at the cross and at the resurrection. But effectively, the kingdom was already showing up in history in a spiritual way in his early preaching of the gospel. Of course, he only had a 3.5-year ministry anyway, so it's not that big a time frame to worry about. But the kingdom is here, especially since the resurrection and ascension, the glorification of Christ, the exaltation of Christ.
Good stuff. Right, almost done here. From a post-mill perspective, what is the next event in prophecy?
Next.
We
don't have prophetic programs of that nature. And dispensationalists say, well, the man of sin's got to arise, the Antichrist has got to come, this has got to happen. Postmillennialism is more generic. We just see the continued development of the gospel and more and more people converting to Christ. It's a gradualistic thing. It's not like the point, and we can say, here's something, there it is.
Right.
Yeah. It's hard to say for postmillennialists because we don't have a system that requires that intricacy of a series of events going on.
Who are the two witnesses from Revelation 11:3?
This reminded me of something. My wife and I are going to Greece in late October with a group called the Footsteps of Paul. And I told the lady that's got the tour organized, I said, when I go to Greece, two people I want to meet, John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John. They said, you're on the wrong tour. Okay. What was the question?
Who are the two witnesses?
Two witnesses. Okay, I believe the two witnesses represent Christians, born-again Christians, who are living at the time of the destruction of the temple in the year 70, and they hold to their faith despite the opposition, and as they're slain, we see them ascending into heaven, and it's just showing that their faith was not in vain, that they did hold true to the end, and that they'll go to heaven, and even though they were persecuted here in the times of the destruction of the temple. It's not a future not a future set of people. It's people from the first century. And the two might be symbolic. The book of Revelation is symbolic through and through. Two might represent the idea of a witness in courts. In courts, in courts, you had to have a twofold witness for something to stand true, not just one testimony. So that's what they're representing, the faithful saints who were probably few in number at that time, who endured the persecution of the Jews within Jerusalem, and then, of course, are the Romans as they destroyed Jerusalem. You know, it's funny, that question comes up a lot, and they don't have that big a role to play in the book of Revelation, but that's a question that people always ask about.
First John 5:19 says, "Whole world is in the power of the evil one." How does the post-mill view this?
But involves that issue of the now but not yet principle, and also the principle of the two ages. Under Adam, in the fallen world, men are under the influence of Satan. But in the world to come, which ultimately will come in fullness at the second coming, we're already experiencing some of that now because of the kind of the overlap of the ages. And so, even though this is a fallen world which we live in, and it'll be fallen until Christ returns again, even at the height of the advance of the gospel in the world, there'll still be unbelievers in the world. So sin will still be here. It's not till eternity, the eternal order, that sin will be done away with. And so those who are outside of Christ are in the world that's dominated by Satan. But we are in Christ, so our world is not dominated by Satan. We are dominated by God, the triune God, and salvation.
Last one, a couple different questions here on it. Yeah, and you may have partly answered some of these before, but we'll address these again. It says, "I'm post-mill, my pastor is amill. How would you address some of his questions?" He's got 3 questions here. I'm going to read them, and I'm going to hand this
I would
paper.
remind the guy, first up, we have an open carry law here in South Carolina.
So I'm going to read these 3 and hand the paper to you. Says the first one is, what would need to happen for post-mill to be proven correct, and where do you get that answer? Number 2, post-mill depends on Old Testament references. What are the best New Testament references? And the third one, why does Jesus question if he will find faith at his resurrection in Luke 18:8? Find faith at his return in Luke 18:8.
Yeah, I did specifically answer that.
Right.
Must have been read beforehand. But now I'm going to come back Tuesday and show you what good cataract surgery do. What would need to happen for post-mill to be proven correct, and where would you get that answer? Well, in the Old Testament, when it talks about the righteousness of God covering the earth as the waters cover the seabed, when we come to a time in earth history where Christianity is expected. It's just like coming into your church on Sunday. Somebody coming to your church off the street, they know what Christianity looks like. They see your people here and what you're talking about and that kind of thing. But when you go out in the world, you don't see that. You see different kinds of opposition. But when we can enter into the world, that's virtually like entering into your church and seeing how Christianity works and the nature of the people and the character of their conduct and things of that sort. But once we get to a state where we can see that the world has become dominated by Christian principles, then we'll say, this is the post-millennial hope. And of course, it'll even be growing at that time, too. So we never reach a final conclusion because it's not until the new heavens and new earth that things are absolutely changed in the eternal sense. And these other 2, actually, the Luke 18:8, I did deal with that, so this must have been read before that. And they asked about the best New Testament references. Well, I mentioned those too, some of the best ones too. The Great Commission assumes it, and John 12, I will draw all men to myself, John 3:17. I did not come to judge the world, but that the world should be saved. Those kind of verses. The New Testament doesn't deal as much with the things we would like for it to deal with as the Old Testament does. The Psalm 22 is just glorious, Psalm 2, and Psalm 110, many of the Psalms just deal directly with the issues. But the New Testament is focused on something more. The Old Testament covers a 1,000-year period of writing. And the New Testament covers about a 30, 40-year period of writing. So it's covering a smaller period and dealing with issues that have just come up because of the coming of Christ. So it doesn't worry as much about the long term, but it does deal with it, but not as directly, not as frequently as you find in the Old Testament.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for your
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Yeah, appreciate it.